Yeah, you read the title right. I'm going to rank the US states based on their best roller coaster. And I'm doing it in two parts so this video doesn't end up being 30 minutes long. As a disclaimer, I will be ranking these as if it was the end of 2024. So there is one state on this list that is much higher than it should be. In this video, I will be starting at the bottom, working my way up to the number 26 spot. With that being said, let's get right into the ranking. Here at the bottom, I will be placing Delaware, Hawaii, and Rhode Island for not having any permanent coasters. This is kinda sad because they're actually great places to house some. In last place of the states with roller coasters is North Dakota with Runaway Train at Super Slide Amusement Park. There's not much to this kiddie coaster, maybe some laterals on those helixes, but it's just a kiddie coaster. There's nothing much to say. The same can really be said about the next state, being Kansas with Dragon Coaster. There's no real rhyme or reason I have this one above the last one, but I guess it does have some light theming to a dragon. Coming in third to last is Nebraska with Go Gator at Funplex. Again, this is another kiddie coaster, but it does seem to have some sharper turns and dips, but they still don't look too forceful. Kicking it up a notch with our first family coaster on this list is Alaska with Aftershock at the Alaska State Fair. I was quite surprised to find that this state had any coaster to begin with. Nevertheless, this still looks to have some powerful drops and laterals. It may not be a super forceful ride, but I'm glad Alaska has at least one permanent coaster. In the 43rd spot is Mississippi with Biloxi Beach Hurricane at Big Play Entertainment Center. This coaster has pretty much the exact same layout as Aftershock, so this placement could have landed either way. Nothing more to say here. Starting off with mountain coasters is Montana with Flathead Lake Alpine Coaster at, you guessed it, Flathead Lake. There's not much to say other than it having high lateral turns and some quick airtime pops when going at full speed. Coming in 41st is another state with a mountain coaster, South Dakota with Rush Mountain Coaster at Rush Mountain Adventure Park. It's essentially the same story with this ride as the last one. High laterals and some airtime moving at full speed. In the 40th spot is yet another state with a mountain coaster, and that's Wyoming with Cowboy Coaster at Snow King Mountain Resort. For a state with no relevance, it does seem to have a decent mountain coaster. In 39th place is, you guessed it, another state with a mountain coaster, being Vermont with Timber Ripper Mountain Coaster at Okemo Ski Resort. I promise this is the last one. These mountain coasters all seem roughly similar, but that's not necessarily a bad thing when they provide intense lateral forces and some ejector airtime. I put this one on top of the others because this is probably the most iconic. Ending the trend of mountain coasters at the 38th spot is Louisiana with Ragin' Cajun at Dixieland. I know this coaster is SBNO, but I want to pretend it's still open. It's a Vekoma Boomerang, so it isn't much, but judging by my ride on Boomerang at Elitch Gardens, it doesn't seem to be a bad ride. Taking those inversions backward is something that gets me dizzy, and I love it. Taking the 37th spot is Arkansas with X-Coaster at Magic Springs. I would have gone with Arkansas Twister, but that looks to be a pretty subpar wooden coaster. This, on the other hand, looks to give great hang time as you finish that vertical lift hill that leans backward into inversion, that rolls you over into another inversion back into the station. It's a one-of-a-kind experience that I would very much like to get on someday, or maybe not, because it's Magic Springs. In 36th place is West Virginia with Big Dipper at Camden Park. This coaster may have the height of a family coaster, but some of those drops do seem to have some legitimate airtime. Those high unbanked turns don't seem to do much, but it's not trying to rip your head off with them. Any family coaster actually having some force is not something you see too often. In the 35th spot is Washington with Classic Coaster at the Washington State Fair. This looks to have about the same stats as Big Dipper, but profiled in a way that gives a little more airtime. All the forces on this ride seem to be pretty strong for a coaster this size. The turnarounds look pretty tight, giving lots of laterals. It also has really nice trains, which I believe are Millennium Flyers, which are super comfortable. Overall, this looks to be really good for its size. Coming in 34th is Oklahoma with Silver Bullet at Frontier City. For me, the main draw is the intensity. This is a Schwarzkopf looper. Of course it's going to be intense, especially on that vertical loop. It might not be that intense, but the winded mess of twists and turns still makes it look to be a fun ride. Taking the 33rd spot is New Mexico with New Mexico Rattler at Cliffs Amusement Park. This is possibly one of the most obscure places for a CCI wooden coaster to end up in. Yet it actually looks to be a good ride, providing a decent amount of laterals and positives. There doesn't seem to be that much airtime on this ride, but the other forces would likely make a trip to this park actually worth it. In the 32nd spot is Nevada with El Loco at the Adventure Dome. I could have gone with either of the hypers in the state, Desperado or Manhattan Express, but they look to be pretty rough with not so great transitions. There was also Canyon Blaster at the same park, but the weirdness of El Loco tops that for me. There looks to be insane laterals on those unbanked turns, and the hang time on this ride is crazy. Everything about this ride screams funky in some way, and I love it for that. In 31st place is Alabama with Rampage at Alabama Adventure. This is kind of where we start to see a shift in scale of some of the rides. This coaster looks pretty tall and fast, as it uses this to its advantage to create over a minute of prime ride time. During that minute, it looks to have borderline ejector airtime on some hills and floater on others. When it's not trying to throw you out of your seat, it keeps you pinned to the side of it. Overall, it's a great looking ride that I would almost go out of my way to get on. Just missing the 20s is New Hampshire with Untamed at Canopy Lake Park. Not a lot of people have been talking about how awesome this ride looks. Maybe it's because it's out of the way. This ride looks to have a pretty forceful layout with that loop giving great positives and that Heartline roll giving great hang time and laterals. There are also a couple switchbacks that look to give insane doses of laterals that no one seems to talk about. It may be a short ride, but it looks to make up for it in the forces department. Taking the 29th spot is Oregon with Adrenaline Peak at Oaks Park. Yet again, we have a Gerstlauer Eurofighter in the northern part of the country. This is essentially the same ride as the last one, but it does have a brighter color scheme, and I think this one runs a little smoother. Aside from that, there's nothing new to say here. There's great hang time on the inversions and some nice laterals all around. In 28th place is Maine with Excalibur at Funtown Splashtown, USA. Not to be confused with Excalibur at Valley Fair, this ride is a fully wooden coaster, though these rides look like they'd rank pretty similarly for me. This looks to be a little rough, but I'll take it because it has almost a full minute of prime ride time filled with pretty consistent airtime and laterals by the looks of it. I just wish it could be talked about a little more. Taking 27th place is Colorado with Defiance at Glenwood Caverns. I have this ranked above the other Gerstlauer Eurofighters because of one thing: the setting. This ride is set on the edge of a cliff. Of course it's going to enhance the ride experience. It may be a shorter ride in length, but that setting alone just placed it many spots higher. However, the layout of this ride is also not to be overlooked. It may be short, but it does not slouch on its forces. Those inversions are really well implemented. The banana roll and heartline roll look to give good doses of laterals and hang time. Overall, this looks to be a great ride that I wish I experienced when I went to Elitch Gardens. Rounding out this video is Connecticut with Boulder Dash at Lake Compounce. This is where we start getting into the amazing rides. This is an amazing looking CCI that goes through an extremely wooded setting that gives airtime all over the place. It also must be incredibly smooth with that Titan track that they put on a while ago. There also looks to be a plethora of laterals with those turns being barely banked. This coaster and park would definitely be a priority if I was to visit this area of the country. That will conclude it for this video. I'm sorry it took so long to get out. I just got really busy in real life. The next part to this video will hopefully be released 2 weeks after this one. Since those coasters are pretty high profile, that video will for sure end up being longer than this one. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.